everyone, if you're there already, good morning. It's 5 a.m. here. So, proves how much I love Sarah, because 5 a.m., not my time of the morning. Hi Sarah, can you hear me? Ugh, I'm so not used to this. It's doing a different Kelly. Sorry, oh, awesome, hey Kurt, thanks. Okay, so, oh good, Sarah, are you there? Can you hear me? What's going on? Sarah is unable to stream, why not? Good. It's just a message that you were unable to join. I think the same thing happened to Kelly, like when I tried to go live with her, but she was hosting. And then I was like standing there watching and she was talking about all this stuff. And then like it kept saying I was unable to join. And I'm like, but I'm right here. What are you talking about? So bizarre. Pardon?
Oh, I was just commiserating. Yes.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, you did. Bright and early over there.
Yeah, 5 in the morning. So I was just saying that it is proof of how much I like you that I'm willing to be up at this time of the morning.
Oh, thanks.
So how's the writing going?
It's great.
Great. Good. That's more than what you've been saying lately.
I'm not dead yet, so.
But you're getting there.
But there's a reason why it's a deadline this time, so we'll see how it goes.
But you set it for what, the 30th now, right?
Yes, but everything has to be finalized and uploaded like 4 days before. So Tuesday is like the hard cutoff. But it will be done. It just might require some late nights, but it'll be fine.
Well, that's fine. You're used to those. I'm trying to make a coffee one-handed. It's awkward. Thankfully, there's been no load shedding lately because we've got no gas.
Oh, no.
So if there was load shedding, it would be a problem because we wouldn't be able to make a hot drink.
All right.
And it is actually really hot, but I'm just like really tired, so I'm going to make a coffee. Okay, so who's here? It looks like some people joined.
Yes, I'm trying to.
Who's here? Awesome.
Hey.
I was really hoping she'd come. And Courtney says doing some family stuff, but I'll try to leave this on in the background, which is cool. And who else is here? Friday Woods is here, and Becky Sims 22A. Welcome, guys.
Hello. Yes.
And Kelly says deadlines are hard during the holidays. I wouldn't know. Maybe one day.
Although I will say for me, once Christmas break started, everything seemed a little bit easier. But then like all of the holiday parties started. So it's like I'm not working right now because we're on break, but then family stuff. and want to be with your kids. So
you're a lot busier than I am. The only family stuff I've got going on is shopping today with Mum and spending a day with Mum on Monday and Tuesday. But yeah, very uncomplicated. All my family's in England. And I guess I'm allowed to say that because none of them are on here. We don't get on that well anyway, so it doesn't make a difference to me. So where are the kids? Are they in bed?
Yeah.
Okay, and they didn't mind going to bed early?
No, this is bedtime. Like it's 5 a.m. for you, but 7 p.m. here, which is we keep a hard and fast.
I know, but I mean it was earlier than 7, and like 7 is their bedtime. So if I was a 4-year-old, I would have rebelled.
Sorry to everyone who's not on the West Coast. You got stuck with my timeline. Some of you are up late.
Yeah, well, I think for them it's like, what, 10, 11? It's not that bad. Okay, so we should probably start with questions, right? Because this can't be too long because you're busy. You need to get back to Phoenix.
Yeah.
So, guys, I don't think, did anyone actually ever send any questions in the end?
They didn't, but that's okay. We can just wing it.
Okay, good. Okay, well, guys, if any of you think of any questions during a live, send them in the question box. Okay, has one?
Yes, so Callie, she asked if I was a late night writer. I am only by necessity. I am naturally a morning person, but because usually I'm like up and driving to work to be at school by 7 a.m., I'm not quite enough of a morning person to write pre-5. So yeah, usually it's like after the kids go to bed until like maybe 11 or midnight. So yes, by necessity, not by choice.
If I go back into writing, it'll definitely be by choice, probably not by necessity. Because my most creative hours at night time, between midnight and 6 in the morning.
I know. I think, Callie, you're a night person too. I don't get it. Like, I want to be, but also not. But I want to just be an all the time person is what it is. But
never sleep.
Who needs sleep?
Don't channel me. It tends to get exhausting when you have that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
My housemate was like, "You never sleep." I'm like, "I know, I'm sorry. After the live interview, I promise you I'll start sleeping." I don't have all those promos to do. Okay.
Oh. Good.
Seasons of Music and Magic. Number 3.
Sorry.
Well, I guess
you froze for a second. First part of that question.
Oh, it froze. You're working on Seasons of Music and Magic number 3, right? Autumn. Fall.
Yes. Yeah. Fall for the alliteration, but it is in the autumn court.
Well, I mean, you're in America, so it's fall.
I'm an American. We call it fall.
So if it's not gonna be spoiler, how does the Phoenix feature? Or is that a spoiler?
Yeah, so this one is based on Stravinsky's Firebird ballet, which is one of the variants of the Prince Ivan and the Firebird fairy tale, which is a Russian fairy tale. And I'm taking it a little bit of a different direction in that I'm usually in that fairy tale, the Firebird is like kind of a separate side character, like animal companion, and I'm actually making the Firebird like a more central character. Mm-hmm. And you'll see some familiar faces. This book was supposed to come out pre-Nutcracker. So for any of you that have already read To Crack a Soldier and you're like, why? Who is the child with Drosselmeyer at the beginning? Well, she's in this book, and she was supposed to be in the world before that, but life happened. So you'll get to meet little Sadie. She's kind of fun. There's a lot of lines that she has that are modeled off of my daughter, who is 4, and just a funny child. So look for those.
That sounds awesome. So I was guessing when I read To Crack a Soldier that she was probably Drosselmeyer's granddaughter. I mean, I think you said that anyway, but Elsa's daughter.
But no actual relation.
Oh, really? Okay. Interesting. What's been your favorite book to write so far and why?
So I really loved Callie and the Pumpkin Seed. Like that's one that was super fun for me just because I got to lean into the puns. And my husband like denies it, but he's a lot like Ever in that book, so that was kind of fun too to play with that. But that one, and then the 7th book of my Order of the Fountain series is a redemption arc that was a long time coming, and I really enjoyed writing that one. So, oh, Callie has a question. Which of my characters am I the most like? Probably Celesta, if we're being honest. There's a lot of, yeah, I am kind of that like bouncy. I don't have the like say what I'm thinking all the time, but like in general, I'm a pretty bouncy, happy person. But it's hard because there's a little bit of me that goes into all of my characters. I wouldn't say that I've modeled any off of me specifically, but she got the most like bubbly Sarah characteristics. So, and the puns, because puns.
Yeah, you're great with puns. Callie calls you the pun queen.
Yeah, it's true.
We talk about you quite a lot, but all good stuff.
It's when my eyes twitch, and I know.
So, was it easier to write about Celesta in To Crack a Soldier or in Summer of the Summoned Sword? Because in Summer of the Summoned Sword, she's a lot more, she doesn't believe in herself as much.
Yeah, so I actually wrote To Crack a Soldier over a year ago, in October, November of 2022, which was, and I didn't start writing Seasons of Music and Magic until the beginning of this year. So she was written way before she ever appeared in Summer. And so like, for me, having that like very bright and vibrant personality, I'm like, oh, this is who she is. And then having to pull her back a little bit because otherwise it would have been Celesta Point 2 book. Because she would have just stolen the but then also like it just made sense for her timeline that she wasn't quite so like happy. So.
Yeah, especially so there's a lot going on in that book, so it makes sense. How close to each other did you write the first two? Spring and summer.
Let's see. I tried to do a thing at the beginning of the year where I tried to split my time between 2 books, and that did not work out. So Spring of Sparkling Song started out as a Kindle Vella, and I started writing that right around Christmas time last year. And then I had to take a break because I was finishing Mermaid book. And I think I finished it in April, and then I wrote Summer in like May, June. So it was within 2 or 3 months of each other.
Okay. And how fast do you generally write a book? I know you were crazy and you wrote To Crack a Soldier in like less than 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
It depends. So most of the time, if I'm like at a healthy level, I'm probably writing a book without like rough draft, without the edits and everything, in about 6 to 8 weeks. And then there are times where like I get myself stuck in a corner, and Summer was written the last 2/3 of it in 2 days this summer. So
Whoa.
It was a lot. I was very blessed in that I could just sit down and write, but yeah, so it depends. I prefer the like longer 6 to 8 week stretch, but sometimes I can crank it out, but usually try not to. Because then there's also the edits and going back, and you always catch things a couple of times. So yeah. Yes, Callie, Kindle Vella is like my goal to do it, but I want to be able to do it right. And I have not figured that out yet, because like the whole serial aspect of it, I have not yet got, but I have some ideas, so I might come to you.
She says it's dead easy. Apparently you just put stuff in a tick box and click publish.
Well, so that part of it is, but it's a different way of thinking, because you have to think in like smaller chunks. And for someone who's like a plotter but also a pantser, Like sometimes the story develops as I'm going, but also I know where like, and it's hard for me to like break it up. So I have to figure that out. But I do enjoy it, and I love reading Bella's because I have to like take them in bites. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm jealous. We still don't have Bella here. I'm hoping because Amazon is coming to South Africa apparently, that Kindle Bella will also come to South Africa. Then I'll be the happiest person ever. But I doubt it.
Great.
Because
I love
it. Stuff. Pardon?
I love it as a reader. I just haven't figured out as the author side yet. But Callie's really, so is Abigail Manning has some great Bellas up there too.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I would love it to be here. I always read her books well late. Okay, and what's the hardest thing about publishing for you?
Why are you asking hard questions?
It's not 5 in the morning for you. You're awake.
Debatable. So I think for me, honestly, the hardest part is not like the actual writing, because I love that. And it's not even the getting the book ready for publication, because I also like the editor side of me loves like finding and fixing all the things. But honestly, it's just the fact that like once it's out in the world, you have no control over how people receive it or respond to it. And whenever you're doing something that's creative, like, it's a part of yourself that you're putting out there. And so like just tossing it into the void of public consumption is hard, because you want people to like it, of course, but then like you also know that not everybody's going to like everything, but you want everyone to like it. So I think that's the hard part, is just letting it go.
Mm-hmm. Now you put that song in my head. Thanks. So, okay, on that, what are your opinions of the reviews? Because I think you might be one of those gluttons for punishments that reads all of them.
I did when I first started. If it generally, if it's a 3-star review or less, I will not read it, because sometimes they're helpful, but a lot of times they're just not. And if I'm not in a mental place that I can like just be like, oh, okay, that was their opinion, then I don't do it. So, but when I leave reviews, it is very rare that I leave anything other than 4 or 5 stars, because if I like a book and I finish it, like I want other people to read it too. So, but yeah, I don't read anything less than 3 stars. That's, people can say things and that's fine, but
That's sensible. Very sensible. Okay, next question, because I've read 4 of your books, taking a break from ARC reading. But they were all the Seasons of Music and Magic ones. Wait, 3. 4 if you count the fact that I'm reading Soldier twice.
out right now, so I don't know where the 4th one came from.
Yeah, no, I'm reading Soldier with context now, so it's really cool. Yeah, so, but the other ones, the Second Star to the Right series, which the Order of the Dancing series, that's the one, and your other series, the Mermaid series. Do they also include a lot of musical elements, like music being magic and that sort of thing? Oh, my other cat just joined us. Now they're both here.
They don't. So actually, the first series, Order of the Fountain, which is the first one that I wrote. Sorry, I just thought I was commenting. Yes, it is also the mood that they're in when they read a review. Some of them are like, I wasn't in the right headspace. I'm like, great, why are you leaving a review? Anyways, back to the question. So, there's very little like actual magic in that one. And a lot of it's kind of along the lines of Chronicles of Narnia, where like there's magic, but it's not necessarily anything that anyone in the story is doing, unless it's a villain, in which case like they're obviously using something that they're not supposed to be. And part of that was because I wasn't sure how I was going to approach the whole magical element. I was like a newbie writer. But then I did the 4th book in that one, which is a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling. And it doesn't have necessarily music as being magic, but creativity. Because instead of 12 dancing princesses, it's the 12 virtuosos. So there's 4 singers, 4 musicians, and 4 dancers. The creativity is what's supposed to power the plot. I don't want to give too much away, and that was like the first hints I had of like, oh, this could be an interesting magic system. But other than that, it's all just kind of your standard fairy tale. Although Chords of Green and Gold, never mind, I take that back. Chords of Green and Gold, The Tales of Eucharia, the music is a little bit in that one. But it's all not in fairy. It's like fantasy standard lands.
Okay, so it's mostly in the in this series.
Yes.
The season series. Okay, cool. Then it was a good one to start off with. Okay, and then why? Oh no, wait. First, the world building. So Holly Dunn Designs does really fun videos, like really fun cameos. And one of the ones she did was the different authors, like a fantasy author, and then she had this huge pile of books for the world building. And I looked at that and thought, oh, I don't think I want to write fantasy. So what made you decide to write fantasy?
What made me decide to write it? I just love fantasy as a genre. Like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and Lloyd Alexander were like my 3 go-to authors as a young reader. And I just love the idea that it's made up, but yet also real at the same time. And I think that specifically when you get into fantasy, there's so many uses of storytelling to convey truth in a way that is both novel, but yet also speaks to that part of us that likes creating and likes the fantastic, and that is just really cool to me. So,
Okay.
And it's all made up and the rules don't matter.
Yeah, I know, that's the best thing about fantasy, I think, is that the rules don't matter. You can just throw them out of the window and make it your own, which is really cool. Okay, would you ever write any genre apart from fantasy?
Maybe. I have toyed with the idea of doing like urban fantasy. Oh, my sister-in-law is here. Hi, Brie.
No way. That's so cool.
But I don't know. Part of that too is that with other genres, there's definitely like a very specific voice and way of writing. So like a lot of times contemporary fiction is written in like first person, which I have a really hard time with. I like third person. Or not limited. Yes, limited, because it's one point of view. So I've thought about it, but not hard enough to like really there.
Okay. And are there any genres that like scare you enough that you're like definitely never, like horror or crime drama or something like that?
Mystery, I don't know that I could do because I'm not clever enough. Like, I don't think I could do the like, oh, and I'm going to plant the clues. Mostly because I don't always know where the story's going to go when I start. And I feel like that's kind of important for a mystery novel, is that like you are planting the clues as you go. Although I guess if it's a mystery to you as you write it, then it could be a mystery to the reader. And then I'm horror and like erotica, obviously, and like all that other stuff is a hard pass. But
yeah, definitely. Have you always written clean, even before you were a Christian, or just since? Pardon?
Sorry, I missed the first part of that question.
Now, have you always written clean books? And when did you actually start writing?
So that's a funny question. When I was in late middle school, early high school, like I actually have a couple of novels that I wrote back then, and they were actually published on Amazon for a time. Like if you look back at like my KDP history before it was KDP, like it goes back to I think 2008, because that's when I published my first book. They've since been taken off. But then I had like a 10 years writer's block, and I picked it back up again in 2021. So like 3 years ago now.
So, okay, that's interesting, Anne. Yeah. With that 10-year hiatus, because the same thing happened to me. So how did you like get your writing muscles back into order after so long?
Yeah, so part of it was that I knew that this was something that I had enjoyed, and one of the reasons that I stopped doing it was just because I felt, as a lot of people who are creatives do, like, oh, like I'm not actually good at this, like what's the whole point, like I might as well just like do something that's not stupid, which is what I felt as a teenager. But then after I had my daughter and I was reading Camille Peters, her Enchantment, and I forget what the actual name of that series is, but her fairy tale series. I was like, oh, I really like this as a genre. This is really creative. And I had like 15,000 words of a story that then became, I like went back to the beginning, took the outline, and that Second Star to the Right is that book that I started in high school, set aside for 10 years, and then dusted off. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which is why it's the most fairy tale of them all, because it didn't start out as a fairy tale.
Got it. Okay. And then how do you rewrite your characters? Like, for example, let's take Peter Pan. Why did you decide to make him the most, how did you say it, the most cinnamoniest role of the cinnamoniest roles or something?
So for that, because whenever you're looking at a fairy tale and you have like very traditional and standard rules, you have to decide, okay, am I going to keep like all of the characters involved? Am I going to combine some? Am I going to switch things around like the Nutcracker? Like I'm going to flip it, gender swap. But for Second Star to the Right, I knew that Pan was going to be the main figure, but with that, it's not actually, well, I mean, there's a fairy in it, so it's kind of a fairy tale. But with that story, you have Peter Pan and you have the Lost Boys, and like they're all together on Neverland. I'm like, well, what if we just combine all of those? And instead of being the fearless leader of the Lost Boys, Peter Pan is the Lost Boy. And so like he was so lost and so alone that there was no other choice in me but to make him so cinnamony because he needed some love. So if you read the first 4 chapters of that book are probably the meanest I've ever been to a character. So he needed to be soft because poor guy.
Makes sense. So I've noticed, well, I mean, I've only read a few of your books, so I can't really say much, but you don't seem to explore dark very much. Do you do that at all, or will you in the future?
What do you mean by dark? You mean like your themes, or?
Yeah, like harder themes like kidnapping, abuse, that sort of thing.
Well, wait for fall to come out next week. So there are some, and so Order of the Fountain does go into some darker places, but with always the understanding that like we have light in the darkness, and that darkness is not glorified, but sometimes you need it in order to see the light. But it also depends on what the story requires. So for Spring of Sparkling Song, right? It's a hero's journey story, and there is darkness, but it's more about Tamarick or Tamino if you're going to the original. I am going dark, Callie. But it's about discovering for like that he is worthy, and that it's about, you know, not him facing the darkness outside, but more like of himself. So that one didn't really require it. And Summer was also like, it's a darkness, but it's the more like other people being jealous and the political manipulation. So it didn't require that like super dark side of things either. The Firebird is a little darker because there's kidnapping that happens, and I mean, I'll leave it at that. There are some darker themes, but it's always to point to the light. So.
Perfect. That sounds amazing. I'm trying to remember the dark elements that you talked about in Spring. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that I read it.
Yeah, and there's really not. I mean, you have your villain who really is only there as like the impetus to get the things going. But yeah, it's really just about like that whole idea of self-worth and who you are in the eyes of the person who created you, not in the eyes of everyone else that you try to find your identity in.
All right, yeah, I remember I highlighted a quote.
Yeah, and then you back at me. I don't remember writing it, so it counts.
It's brilliant. Okay, that leads us to imposter syndrome, actually, because that quote was like really encouraging. That's why I put it up on Instagram. So how do you deal with imposter syndrome? Because I know that you struggle with it, as do a lot of authors.
I mean, it depends on the day. It's always an ongoing battle because, well, one, as an author and as anyone who creates things, there is a tendency to define yourself by what you can make or by what you do. And when you're that, there's always going to be someone who is better. That's just the way that it is, or someone that is better. So when your focus is on yourself that way, then it's a lot harder to get past that. And it's understanding and remembering, it's the remembering that's hard, that you are not the product of what you create. Rather, you create because of who you are created to be, right? We're all created in the image of God. So we are creative. And anything that I create is just a gift that comes from that. So in which case, like, I can't be an imposter because I was given a gift and I'm using it. Now, remembering that, not always super easy, but we try.
Okay. And then in your books, you talk about the Almighty. So you obviously want people to think about God and stuff. How do you, willingness as well. Do you do that like sort of off the cuff, or do you sort of plan it before you write the book that this is how he's going to feature and this is why?
Yeah, so this is actually something that I thought a lot about, especially through my first series, and it's a little bit easier now. So I am, newsflash, I am a Christian. Jesus has my heart. And it can be, fantasy and Christian fiction can be really hard to mesh sometimes because one, you are either trying to fit God into a world that is not this world. So it can feel very forced. Or on the other hand, you can be kind of flippant or trite. So it's always trying to find that balance of like, okay, so we're pointing to a greater power, but also with the understanding that it doesn't exist in this world. So like C.S. Lewis does this great with Aslan, right? You have a lion. We all know that the lion is supposed to be like Jesus, but yet it's a lion. It's not Jesus. So
Although in the Bible,
it was planned.
God is a lion.
But also it's very intentionally kept not specifically Jesus, because I don't ever want to run the risk of either treating something flippantly or having someone think that I did.
Okay, and Kelly says it's a hard balance, which I'd agree with, but a lot of authors will give their God sort of character a new name, and you chose, at least in the season series, to use the Almighty. What sparked that decision?
I don't know. Part of it is, so in my first series, The Order of the Fountain, it was he was the creator, with the understanding that like, because, and I don't remember why, it was something about like, well, obviously he created something. And in this one, I wanted to take a little bit, like, I didn't want it to be exactly the same, but then there is also this kind of overview, and you get this a lot in Summer, this idea that like we are all kind of musicians in a grand orchestra, and so he is the Almighty that oversees it all and like puts people in their place. And so that kind of like overarching, especially because it's in the world of fairy, which feels to me very self-contained, because it's like it's the four courts and it's like it's limited. So that was part of where that came from. But other than that, it was also just like I needed something else that was obviously God, but not.
Okay. And what gave you the idea for the, is it the heart songs or the soul songs that you spoke about in Seasons of Music and Magic? Because I absolutely loved how music was so integral to All Souls in that series. That was amazing.
Yes. Let me think about that for a second. Oh, hi, Andrea.
So like Lohengrin, he
Yeah.
like fixed the notes that were wrong
Yeah.
in order to heal people and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And that kind of stemmed from the idea. So there is a verse, I know it's in Psalms and it gets put other places, that like all creation is singing the praise, singing God's praises, like the rocks and the mountains and everything else cries out. That idea that like everything in God's creation. And so for Lohengrin, in that one, it's the idea that like, oh, he can hear the songs that are innate within us that are praising God, even if maybe they didn't know that that's what they were doing. But we're all created to praise. That's always there. So that's where that came from.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, for viewers, you guys are welcome to ask your own questions and post comments. You don't have to let me ask all the questions. Okay, what's your favorite thing about writing and what's your worst?
I mean, I think they're probably kind of two sides of the same coin. So I love like the creativity and coming up with new ideas and in discovering, you know, new characters and new worlds. But then there's also sometimes the hard part is doing that. So sitting down, like, okay, who is this person? What is their motivation? You know, how does this factor into the larger scale thing? And sometimes I do it real well and sometimes I don't. And it can be both a struggle and a joy.
Okay. And how hard is it to write with little people? Because obviously you have to deal with them fighting and stuff sometimes.
Yeah, so I mean,
not wanting to do that.
there's distractions all the place. But it's hard sometimes. Sometimes not so much. But like for the one I'm writing right now, like I have an endless source of inspiration in my daughter because she's got the funniest quotes, and I started writing some of them down. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to use that sometime later on. And then also too, whenever one of the things that I found as a reader, I'll get to your question in a second, Callie. I just saw that. Like as a reader, sometimes whenever I see like children written into stories, I'm like, the kids don't actually act that way. And so now like I'm thinking, oh, like I can think about this. I'm like, oh, what would my kid do? Okay. Cool. Callie has a non-writing question. What is my favorite Christmas cookie? If all of them is not an acceptable answer. Okay.
Yes, it is.
So this is not okay, so I'm gonna go holiday specific. I love a good gingerbread, like spicy and like a little bit crunchy, but a little bit soft, and like the sugar icing, yes, is delicious. Non-Christmas cookie, but that I so far have only gotten at Christmas time. One of my coworkers, she teaches art. She makes these lemon rosemary shortbread cookies that are so good that I wrote them into Callie and the pumpkin seed because I could not stop thinking about them. And then lo and behold, I got them again at Christmas this year. So in my mind, they're a Christmas cookie.
Wait, before you answer the next question from your sister-in-law, just on that, do you include recipes in any of your books, like at the end or something? Or would you ever like do a recipe book that goes with one of your books?
And only because most of my recipes I pull from like blogs on the internet, and I'm not sure on the legality of like reprinting something that's not actually my recipe.
Fair enough, yeah.
In the kitchen, I just enjoy what other people create, and if I recreate them. Okay, so other question: how many books do I have planned in 2024? So confirmed. The last in Seasons of Music and Magic, The Winter, is coming out sometime, hopefully in March or April. I'm doing, Layla Humphreys has a charity series that she's doing, and I'm slated to be part of that. I think my contribution comes out in June. And I have another secret project coming out the end of the year. That's at least 3. And then for all of you, My Fair Mermaid fans, Freddie's book is ideally coming out next summer. So 4 minimum. I'm going to leave it at that. And then if I have any bonuses that come out, then that'll be exciting.
You're also participating in Jess's collaboration.
But that's not till 2025, right?
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's not
right?
so much
Yes. Yes, I am. So like beyond that, which is crazy because when I first started writing, I never thought beyond like the next book, and now I'm like 2 years out, which is crazy to me. But
wow, that's really cool. How do you keep it all together? And do you write more than one book at a time?
I don't keep it all together, Kate. That's the answer to that question. And no, I cannot write more than one book at the same time. I tried. I tried writing Spring of Sparkling Song and My Fair Mermaid at the same time. And since I write, there are some authors that like can write scenes at a time and then they like arrange them like a giant jigsaw puzzle, which their minds are beautiful. But I can't. I have to write straight through. So hopping from story to story while like trying to do that was hard. And then I also had two main characters whose names started with M, and that was also difficult. So,
Or keeping them like separate in your mind?
so I had to stop writing one, finish the other, and then go back. And then, but sometimes it's a motivation though, because like I really want to write the story for the Hope collaboration, but I can't yet because I have to finish the project I'm working on first. So
That's a good collaboration. And I think you're the only author I've ever known who rewrites operas. So is that because of your love for music? And is it also because you want other people to like opera?
so yes, and kind of. Mostly the opera thing came about because I was teaching music history to my 5th and 6th graders, and we were studying a synopsis. Well, I was putting together a synopsis of Firebird because we were going to listen to some of the music from it. And I'm like, this is a really awesome story. Why has this not been retold that I know of? And then the same thing with the Magic Flute, which is like very definitely a fairy tale. Which is funny because I started writing Spring of Sparkling Song, and then there was actually a movie adaptation of the Magic Flute that came out the same year. But I'm like, this is also a really great story. Why do we not know this? And so then I kind of was going through, and ideally people will read these stories and be like, oh, I would like to experience an opera. But I also know that opera is not for everyone. But it is kind of cool to think about, like, these are stories that have been experienced by people in a variety of ways. Because way back when, going to the opera was like going to the movies. It was just what you did for entertainment. So it's just taking that story and giving it new life in a different medium.
And which do you prefer, rewriting, opera or ballet?
So yeah, the operas are a little bit easier just in terms of source material because there's more. So like Spring of Sparkling Song, because it's the Magic Flute, like pretty much a lot of the story structure from the first act I kept, and I changed names, and like I changed some motivations and tweaked the timeline a little bit. But because there's actually like a story that is unfolding, there's more to draw from. Ballets are hard because, one, nobody talks or sings. And they're usually shorter. So like the Nutcracker is 2 acts. All of the action happens in Act 1, and Act 2 is all just the dances from the Land of Sweets. So the Cracker Soldier, all of the Nutcracker part happened in the first 2 chapters. And then the rest is just the adventure through the Land of Sweets, in this case, fairy. But ballets also allow a little bit more creativity, and that you have the outline, but more freedom to play a little bit. So kind of just depends. And then Low and Green, I had to change the ending. So we had to add a little bit on there.
I'm so glad you changed that ending. Not that I knew it in the first place, but yeah, I mean, the original ending was apparently pretty tragic, so I'm really glad you changed it. Your ending was great. I think Gerard Urson, who just joined, I think he's one of my students. That's actually really cool.
Up nice and early.
Yeah. It is very early for him, actually. No, wait, he's 2 hours later than me, if it's correct.
Never.
I think it is. He's in Turkey. Okay. And is there anything about indie publishing that scared you in the beginning that made you think maybe I don't want to go with this route, and why did you not go traditional publishing?
So it was actually the opposite, that traditional publishing scared me and indie publishing seemed very accessible. Because the idea of writing query letters and getting rejected over and over and over and over again did not appeal to me. So it was like, hey, look, I can just put my book up there and publish it. Anybody can do it. And there's a lot that I've learned since I started that, but also like I would do it again this way if I had to choose.
Interesting. And let's talk about editing for a little while. So how many editors do you have? Do you have a line editor and a proof editor and a developmental editor, or do you just have one?
I have one.
Who does everything? So how much editing do you do before she does? Because I know Kelly like pre-edits.
Kayt, I am so poor. Not poor. So this is a hobby and it's not a career for me. So I am my editor, which you can definitely tell a lot in my first books because I was not quite sure what I was doing and I did things quickly. I have gotten a lot better. And definitely like it is something that I am looking at finding people to do. But like for right now, this is what I can do. So I can either have nice covers or I can find someone to do all that. And I'm going with the nice covers right now. So I don't recommend anyone do that, but that is where I'm at right now.
Okay, and how did you find your cover artist? Does the same person do all your covers?
Hold on a second, Callie. For Olive Order the Fountain, I had them recovered. That was Meeble Art is a company that did that, and then they've done Season of Music and Magic, and then the Tales of Eucharia have been get covers because the first in that was a Christmas present for my niece, and so it needed to be not super expensive. And then because I started the series with them, I just continued for the other ones. And they've been great to work with, and they're very affordable for, you know, people who are starting out. And it is just a hobby, and you don't want to invest like $400 in a cover. But I will say, $400 covers are gorgeous and nice. So, Callie asked, what would I recommend for unpublished writers? Just do it. That's a very vague question. Like one, I think it all depends on like why you're publishing. Like if you're doing it because you think you're going to be the next J.K. Rowling, you're not. But if it is just, hey, I have a story and I want to share it with the world, and this is a passion that I feel strongly about, then like let's like find a way to make it happen. Like everyone has a story to tell, I think.
Although Andre, she got rejected numerous times.
She did,
and now those publishers are probably kicking themselves, thinking, "Oh, why did we reject that?"
He could have had Harry Potter.
Okay. I think I now have questions. Okay, what would you never write about? Not genre, we covered that. But like any themes or anything that you would completely and utterly avoid, and why? Sorry, itchy nose.
So I will always stray, like some people can do morally gray heroes very well, and I can't. I don't do that, and only because for me it's like it's very hard to have someone who is morally gray if it's not a redemption arc. Like I don't ever want to have a character that does something wrong. It's like, well, but he did the wrong thing for the right reasons, but then there were no consequences because morally gray. So I will always have, if there are poor choices, there are consequences. And so like to go along with that, like usually if there is a love interest, like they are either very kind to like enemies to lovers, but like if that happens, trying to figure it out, I'll say it's the right way. Like there's no bullying that goes along or that goes into that, or violence that's unnecessary. Just because I don't think that it's something that needs to be glorified. In a villain, it's one thing, but in the hero, I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
It was a very
And what would you never read?
Nice.
Say that again, sorry?
That it was a very roundabout way of saying, I just want my characters to be nice.
Like you.
I try.
What would you never read? I mean, obviously you avoid spice. What else do you avoid?
Not much. Like I'm pretty, as long as it's not, there's not gratuitous sex or violence, like I will read pretty much anything. I do feel like I've already done my share of philosophy and research books. But fiction wise, like as long as it has a good story, like I will read anything. Sometimes I find books that I didn't know that I would enjoy otherwise. So.
And you can do that because you take about 10 seconds to read a book, so.
A little longer than that, but yes, I do. That is,
maybe about 5 minutes.
I can read very fast, but.
You're so lucky. I wish I had that superpower. I had another question on that, and now it's gone. Research. How do you do your research, and how much research do you do?
So it depends on the source material. If it's a common fairy tale, and especially if I'm doing a mashup of several different ones, I might look at 1 or 2 different variations. But if it's like, I'm thinking of, Rapunzel, there's a couple different ones, but for the most part, no, it's a maiden in a tower and the prince climbs up. And so like, for some of those, I'll just be a little bit more free with things. When it's the operas and the ballets, I do a lot of research into like reading synopses. And if I am not already familiar with the music, I have like a playlist of things that I'll listen to just to kind of get a feel for the general idea of things. And then there's always research that happens like as I'm doing it, like, oh, this is, what instrument is this? Or is this actually physically possible? But as far as getting the story, I try to read as many of the variations as I can if it's one I'm not familiar with. And then go from there.
Okay. And how do you write the music in a way that people who aren't that familiar with the music world will understand? So you did that really well in these season's books.
And all of that comes from the fact that my entire job is to take music and make it relatable to 6-year-olds. So a lot of that skill just came from having to either write papers or describe things or talk about music with people that don't know. Because when I first started teaching, like for me as a musician, I'm like, oh, this makes total sense. Why don't you get it? And then realizing like, no, not everybody has that understanding. So that's where most of that comes from, is just that experience in life.
Okay. And then totally non-writing related, what's the hardest part of your job as an elementary music teacher?
Part of it, I think, is just, so for me, I teach PK through 6th, but then this year I also have a couple of high school classes, and it's just the mental switch because I don't have all one group and then the other. So like I'll go from like kindergarten to 5th grade to 1st grade to 3rd grade, just like mentally switching the way that I talk to students and remembering what everyone is doing. Because they don't, like, it's a different lesson plan depending on the grade and what they're learning and focusing on. So
you can't really talk to a high schooler the way you would talk to a kindergartner.
Sometimes I do, but but yeah, if you go, okay, friends, like they'll look at you funny. What are you doing?
That's true. Do you ever have behavioral problems in your classes? How big are your classes?
I mean, that's a normal amount. I usually have, my biggest classes are like 22, 23, so they're not huge. The biggest issue just comes from the fact that I bring them into my classroom and say, hey, we're going to make noise, but only when I say, which is sometimes hard for them to handle.
Understandable. And do you have any kids who don't enjoy music in your classes? Because I assume they're compulsory classes.
Yeah. Yes, but no. So, sorry, this is not completely writing. This is not writing related at all. And this is going to get me on a soapbox. I will try to keep it small. So, most of the kids that come into my classes, and actually most people you meet in general, appreciate and enjoy music. Usually, if there's any pushback, it comes from the fact that they are being asked to listen to or experience music that is not something that they are naturally drawn towards, or that parents have geared them towards what their parents listen to. Because a lot of times, especially with young kids, they end up actually like, oh, I actually really like it, and I didn't think I would like classical music. So usually, as long as you can get them to be like, okay, well, like just think about it. You don't have to like it, but listen to it, and then they can usually find something worthwhile in it.
Interesting. Okay. I had one more question about that. No, it was rating related, but now my mind's gone blank. I'm going to kick myself after this because I'm going to be like, oh, that's such an important question. I never asked it. No, it's gone. Okay, and oh no, actually, this wasn't the question I was thinking of. But what's your favorite part of writing in a collaboration, and why do you write in so many?
I love just having I love having friends. So, and I've met a lot of awesome people through writing and collaborations, and then just also the fact that we're all working on something together and at the same time, and so like there's that little bit of experience, and then also just seeing like with the autumn fairy tales, how everyone like chose to incorporate that and pull those themes in, and yet still kept their unique voices. And the answer as to why I'm doing so many is because I like friends. Also because I like novellas are fun because they're short and I like use them as palette cleansers between big projects. And it's just a great way to meet new people and to try new things. And so, yeah.
All collaborations, novellas?
Not always, but all of the ones that I have been a part of have been.
Okay. So, lengthwise for the non-writers here, what's the difference between a novella and a proper novel? And don't talk in words because you mostly get like
that's
pages.
The distinction. So if you're going by if you're thinking about a printed book, so like word count wise, if you're like probably most middle grade books are the length of a novella. It's usually between 20 and 50,000 is the upper limit words, which printed pages is usually about 170 to 220 maybe. I don't know. I'm speaking in general ranges here. But it's, about that big. Whereas a novel is anything longer than that. So that's where like Harry Potter is a novel, right? It's a thick book. Or a lot of fantasy books that are, like 2 or 3 inches. So that's the difference, is that a novella has a cap and a novel doesn't, essentially.
That makes sense. So I was listening to Two Men and a Romance Novel, with Abby's brother-in-law and husband. And there was one part where her husband said, it's 500 pages, so it's a long book. And I packed out laughing. I was like, what? He's married to Abby and he thinks 500 pages is a long book. So I messaged her and she's like, well, for a non-reader, it is.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, but he apparently listens to audiobooks. So on that, what do you like? How do you like reading more? Do you like reading physical books, listening to audiobooks, reading digital, all three?
So I usually read ebook versions just because I can get those easily and quickly. And